There's this massive kind of hidden paradox right at the heart of the US economy. It involves an incredible amount of wealth, a really fundamental choice that was made, and a multi-trillion-dollar question that, honestly, most of us have never even thought to ask.
Okay, so if I asked you to name the world's biggest oil producer, what would you say? Probably Saudi Arabia, maybe Russia, right? Well, you'd actually be wrong. The United States is number one. We pump out more crude oil than any other country on the planet, and believe me, it is not even a close race.
And that brings up a huge question. With all of this incredible natural resource wealth, where is America's national savings account? Where's the giant fund storing all that money for the country's future?
To answer that, we first need to get on the same page about what we're even talking about. What is a national wealth fund? Well, the simplest way to think about it is like a nation's long-term savings account. The official name for it is a sovereign wealth fund, or SWF. And basically, it's a state-owned fund that takes the money a country makes from selling its natural resources, like oil, and invests it. The whole point isn't to spend it today, but to grow that wealth for generations down the road.
And when you talk about SWFs, there is one country that is the absolute gold standard. It's the one everyone points to as the perfect example, Norway, and its Government Pension Fund Global.
And the size of this thing is it's almost hard to wrap your head around. It's worth over $1.5 trillion. Now keep in mind, Norway's entire population is smaller than the state of Minnesota. That is an unbelievable amount of national savings, and it was all built from their oil. So how in the world did Norway build this massive fund while the US, the top oil producer on Earth, has nothing like it at the federal level? Well, it all comes down to two totally different ways of thinking about ownership, specifically who owns the resources that are in the ground. And this is the critical difference. In Norway, the oil and gas belong to the state, so when it's sold, the profits flow directly into that public government-run fund. But here in the US, those resources are primarily privately owned, so the profits? They go to private companies and, of course, their shareholders. It's one simple fork in the road that leads to two completely different destinations.
It really just boils down to a core philosophical choice. Is the wealth buried under the ground a public resource that belongs to everyone, now and in the future? Or is it a private one that belongs to whoever happens to own the land right above it? The US and Norway just picked very different answers to that question.
But hold on, the story in the US isn't quite that simple. While it's true there's no federal fund, that's not the whole picture. If we zoom in a little bit, from the national level down to the state level, things start to look a little different.
You see, some individual states actually do have what are called permanent funds, which are pretty much just mini sovereign wealth funds. States that are rich in resources, like Alaska and Texas, take a cut of their oil revenue and put it into a public savings account, just for the state.
And this is where the sheer difference in scale just hits you like a ton of bricks. Norway's national fund, over $1.5 trillion. Alaska's fund, which is one of the biggest in the US, is around $75 billion. Now, that is a ton of money for one state, for sure, but it is just a tiny fraction of what's possible on a national scale. And the US federal fund? A big round zero.
So this all leads us to the real heart of the matter. What's the consequence of the path the US chose? What is the opportunity cost of the American model?
Just imagine for a second what a national fund of this size could actually mean. It could be a permanent source of wealth to tackle our biggest challenges. We're talking about rebuilding crumbling infrastructure, funding the next huge scientific breakthrough, shoring up Social Security, paying down the national debt, or even just having a massive rainy day fund for the next unexpected crisis.
So let's ask the really big question. What if? What if the US had gone down the Norwegian path? What would we be talking about in terms of cold, hard cash? How big could a US sovereign wealth fund be right now?
Well, the estimates are just staggering. A US fund could potentially be worth over $5 trillion today. Let that sink in. That's more than 3 times the size of Norway's already gigantic fund. It's a pool of national wealth so large, it could literally rewrite the country's entire economic future. And that leaves us with one last fascinating question to think about. Was this a massive missed opportunity for the United States? Or is the creation of immense private wealth instead of public wealth simply the price you pay, and maybe even the intended outcome of the American economic model?